This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Pew is out with a new study on religiosity. They find that people who are actively religious, practitioners of their faith, church attendees, are happier than the less religious. They looked at 19 countries. Gaps are striking. In the U.S., for instance, 36% of the actively religious describe themselves as very happy, compared with only 25% of the inactively religious and 25% of the unaffiliated. A significant difference. Also, there tends to be a good connection between better health and religious devotion, because people who tend to be practitioners of their faith, for example, smoke and drink less than their counterparts who are not religious, serious about their religion, serious about their faith, or otherwise active. In all but 2 of the 19 countries Pew looked at for which data available, actively religious less likely than the unaffiliated to smoke, and in all but 1 country, less likely than the inactively religious to smoke as well, for example. There's additional societal benefits to practicing your faith. A Wall Street Journal op-ed by executive at the Philanthropy Roundtable last week. Among Americans who attend services weekly, 45% do volunteer work compared with 27% for the entire population.
Amy Jacobson.
Amy Jacobson.
May I say?
Yeah. Well,
I do.
Yeah,
I
be
mean,
a good example.
Yeah.
It's a real thing.
That's so true.
Number of studies that find that church attendance, including in urban centers, associated with better academic performance, more success in holding jobs, less incidence of criminal activity.
Jacobson.
Yes, you have not committed a crime in some time, ever since you started attending church.
Yeah.
So the disappearance of churches, what to do with empty churches, the headline of this op-ed in the journal I was referring to, combined with the disappearance of parishioners in states like Illinois, when you have an exodus like we're seeing, an exodus not seen since the Israelites fled Egypt, Illinois leading the nation in outmigration 5 years running, and that will continue. And a local pastor named Mike Woodruff, who's a senior pastor at Christ Church, he's actually finally figured this out, one of the few in the clergy who has. Hey, if all our parishioners leave, all our congregants leave,
we might not.
That's not good for the church. It's not good for the community we attempt to serve. So it turns out that just because we're not getting forced out of our church through confiscatory property taxes like homeowners are, or commercial businesses are in Illinois, we get impacted too. Nobody gets out of this catastrophe called Illinois unscathed. Welcome to the party, men and women of the cloth. I'm sorry to say the Catholic Church in this, certainly the Archdiocese, is not as woke, if I could borrow a word, on the topic as Pastor Woodruff, who joins us now. Mike Woodruff, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Good to be here.
So, describe your sort of coming to terms with the fact that Illinois' economic death spiral has a negative impact on faith communities.
Yeah, such a happy topic for early in the morning.
Wow.
A few years ago, I was reading an article in The Economist. I was sitting at O'Hare Airport. I was reading an article in The Economist, and it was on Illinois' pension woes. And I glanced up at the screen, and I saw a news report about rioting in Greece. And I had one of those serendipitous moments where I thought, wow, maybe I had to pay more attention to some of the challenges that are affecting the state and affecting people. As you know, I mean, real people get hurt because of these things. And so that was a few years ago.
Well, and okay, and so the conversations you've had with your colleagues in different faith communities about, hey, have you noticed you see dwindling attendance at your services? Hey, have you noticed that people are having a more and more difficult time of making it a go here. Have you noticed that maybe some of the policies being advanced by the political ruling class in the state of both parties should be addressed by men and women of the cloth?
Yeah, so I started I'm obviously in lots of those conversations, and you're always trying to figure out how people are doing and how things are going and what the trend lines are. The reason I wrote the letter that I wrote was because lots of people who end up on staff at a church are people who are sort of wired and inclined to run towards the crisis and not necessarily to try and prevent it. And so it's just a little bit of a, hey, let's get ready for some of the additional challenges that are in the pipeline. Some of these things are in the pipeline. There's no avoiding them at this point. So let's think ahead to how we get better positioned to help people who are going to get hurt pretty significantly by some of the challenges that are in the pipeline.
Yeah. Is there, how do you suggest we try and get more people to church? I mean, I was part of two churches, St. John's,
Andy,
it closed down, and then the one in Skokie, the Episcopal Church my grandparents started, that shut down too because of low attendance.
Yeah, well, we've sort of seen a big shift in the last, in 50 years, in one sense. We sort of moved from a Sabbath where people were restored to a Sunday where people have been amused, to a weekend where people are trying to catch up, and now I think there's a little bit of pushback on that front. So, yeah, hey, Andy, we'll sign you up to help promote churches throughout Chicago. And as you noted earlier, there's lots of studies that suggest that life works better when people figure out what life is about and are connected to God and others and are serving people and sort of have rightly ordered loves and all the things that for 2,000 to 3,000 years we've known about.
Yeah, well, I've figured that out through Scripture, not me, but I figured it out. I understand it, and I'm trying to act in furtherance of it. But let me tell you something else about Illinois in particular, and I'm Catholic, so let me just talk about the Catholic Church. With the exception of some parishes, like the one I attend, the Catholic Church has been a disgrace as it pertains to taking up any of these issues that have hurt its parishioners. And I'm not just talking about scandal within the church. I'm also talking about the scandalous policies promulgated by Illinois' political ruling class. They have been absent without leave on these issues, as tens of thousands, now we're getting into hundreds of thousands of Illinoisans flee for other states every year. Absent without leave. They've said nothing except, frankly, to throw in with the political ruling class more often than not. And so part of this is a little bit of accountability, I would hope, not just in the Catholic Church, but I'll start there, my own faith, for what they have allowed to metastasize on their watch. They're not innocent. They're not absolved of responsibility. They're here. And I would say the same thing of other faith communities. What are you doing to prevent Illinois from being the worst governed state in the country, which it is?
Yeah. So, Dan, I'm not sure what you want me to say.
Well,
yeah.
I want you to say. I mean, either clergy gets involved, religious leaders get involved in the political and policy process, or they don't. And the question is, what are clergy going to do?
Yeah. Well, so the clergy don't act as a monolithic block as nobody does. But yes, the good government matters to people, and we see it, and we're seeing it now. And what I have been trying to do is a little bit less of the prophetic role, although I'm absolutely all for that. I think we need to speak truth to power, and we are trying to do that. I'm also saying let's figure out ways to educate, but also to help. And let's figure out how to mobilize people to love and serve. There's going to be more people hurt. So as you and others are trying to figure out how do we get out and fix the political problem, I'm saying it would be prudent for lots of people to figure out how to help others and to bring a sense of hope in the midst of this. So it's going to get worse. I believe that. But I also think that there's hope and there's reasons that if good people will step up, we can see some things turn.
Well, I agree with that. I guess my point is to say, look, I mean, all the volunteerism that we mentioned at the outset and that faith communities are so important in supporting is all good. That's great. But what I don't see is the sort of policy activism that is required just civically. Forget, you just strip away any religious designation. Civically, to speak truth to power, to borrow a social justiceism, as you did, to put in the fight, to make judgment calls and to inform parishioners and congregants who otherwise are ill-informed about what's going on and why, to take positions rather than do the Pontius Pilate routine that so many men and women of the cloth are content to do in this state because they say, well, that's not my role. My role is just to be a shepherd. I'm sorry, but it's all hands on deck at this point.
Okay. Well, I am one hand on deck.
Okay,
So,
well, that's but I mean, my point is to say you are. I mean, I'm not trying to berate you.
Yeah.
I'm mostly berating people that are in my church. But I just want other people to say that, to say we have to. It doesn't have to be from the pulpit. Okay, fine. But the lame excuses about C3 status and the lame excuses about that's not my role, that's not my purview. It just doesn't wash anymore for me. And I wish more clergy like you would take up these issues and have conversations within your circles of influence about them.
Yep. Well, so, and I'm going to spin this just a little bit, and I'm going to say, I think that there are opportunities to have these conversations across the aisle. There's opportunities to have these conversations more broadly when people are serving, when people are helping, when people are saying, I'm not simply going to sit back and be frustrated or say other people need to do things or government needs to do things. I think government needs to be responsible, and I would fault, obviously, Illinois for not being responsible. But what I'm also trying to say is there's opportunities now to love and serve, to mobilize volunteers, to figure out how to help people. So in the midst of, when you're helping somebody, you have a much greater opportunity to try and persuade them that maybe they ought to take a look at what you're saying on other fronts.
Yeah, no, agreed. Exactly. Yeah, right. No, I know. That's my point. That's why it's actually men and women of the cloth that are best positioned to move the needle and to imbue people with a sense of hope to dispel the fatalism that otherwise afflicts this state. That's sort of my point.
Yeah. And I have tried to say, that's one of the other things that I've tried to say. When I first did a deep dive on this 3-4 years ago, you may know this, Dan, but it's hard to get invited to parties when you want to talk about how bad things are and how bad they're going to get. And while most states are paying 9% of their budget towards public pensions, and we're at whatever approaching 30, and we're headed north of that. And how do you balance budgets, and how are you going to fix this? And at some point, I woke up and said, "Okay, we've got to bring a little bit of hope and can do, and let's do this and let's tackle this." And it also comes alongside caring for people. I'm trying at Christ Church, trying to mobilize more volunteers, serve more people, work through all kinds of existing organizations to make things better, and at the same time say, big government is a moral issue. We need better government.
All right. He is Pastor Mike Woodruff, senior pastor at Christ Church. You should check out the story, which is how we came to identify Pastor Woodruff. It's Gospel Coalition, thegospelcoalition.org, thegospelcoalition.org. Churches Brace for the Illinois Exodus, as well as the piece in the Wall Street Journal, What to Do with Empty Churches. Pastor Woodruff, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made the switch, and it feels so good. You've switched to Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hey!